Quite often, when we start to design an architectural project, we forget about how important it is to sell our idea. It's great to have an original or innovative idea for the space you're designing, but sometimes it's not enough. In our experience, presenting our project proficiently is as essential as the architectural design itself, especially to help our client understand it or to impress a jury in an architectural competition. That is why we need to dedicate a lot of time to polish our presentation. Questions such as, what's the best perspective to express my idea? Or what can I do so that my project transmits exactly what's in my head are very common at our studio. During this course, we are going to examine in detail keys to present our projects with success, and we're going to do so by using Photoshop and Illustrator as our main tools. Combining these programs, we're going to put across our ideas the best way possible. We intend to better your skills in managing graphics, in the drafting of elevations, crossed sections, floor plans, or axonometric projections. From the European School of Architecture, we would love to share with you our experience in polishing, embellishing, and essentially taking your graphics to the next level. In every video, we will analyze how to work on different areas of the architectural presentation, breaking down the process step by step so everything is easy and clear. We invite you to watch the first video of a 9-video series of the course to polish project presentation. Okay, so let's begin. For the first exercise of the course, you are going to need to have your Photoshop properly installed. We recommend you install Photoshop 2017, 18 or 19, 2020. Anything from 2017 is good enough. We have left some links on our website which you can access to download the materials for these exercises, so make sure you download that too. And well, let's get started. Okay, so we're going to be doing a lot of this throughout the whole course, and we're going to advance more in terms of how to brush up, how to wrap up your final plans. Okay, so this is just to give you an insight on the things we will be doing. So we need you to open your Photoshop and find this PDF section, and what I do is I just click on it and drag it into your workspace in Photoshop. Great. So the first thing that you'll see is this transparent image behind your section. But before we start, there are some things that are very important. Okay, so it's very important that you're organized with your toolbars. So we're going to be using this toolbar a lot. These are drawing and editing tools, moving, selecting, painting, drawing, and so forth. So you need to have this available. Normally it's left by default on the left, so keep it there, and as you advance you probably want to change it. Well, not probably. If you want, you can change it. I would recommend you leave it where it is for now. And here you have this toolbar: layers, channels, paths, libraries. We're going to work with layers, especially with layers, and maybe by default you'll have this window like this. We normally have it, we just spread it to the bottom, so we have plenty of space here to have, because in the end all your files, all your Photoshop working collage and plans are going to need a lot of layers, and it's better to see all of them here. Also, you can change the size, of your thumbnails. You can have no thumbnails, and you can have smaller thumbnails or medium or big thumbnails. I would recommend you have like a decent sized image here, so you can identify what is in each layer in every time, unless you're not working with too many layers. In that case it's not important, but it's very recommendable. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to name this layer. It's very important to be organized, and I'm going to call it template section. Fine. And as I said before, the first thing you see is this, well, you've got this pattern here which symbolizes in Photoshop transparency. Okay, it's more difficult to work with, but it basically says, imagine you have a transparent sheet of paper with just these lines drawn on, and whatever it is behind that sheet, you can see through it. Okay, so what we need to do is to create a white background for it. We're going to click on this one. These are adjustment layers. Okay, and we're going to see many of these options. They're very useful in Photoshop. We're going to start with solid color. Okay, and we're going to find a white. Make sure you have 255, 255 and 255 here. That's the pure white. You press OK. And what's happened now? What's happened is that our white background is on the top. Okay, imagine your white sheet of paper is on top of your transparent sheet of paper with those lines. If you drag it and put it behind, you will see your image more clearly. Okay, other things, I'm using the space bar to move, to move around. Okay, and I'm using the scrolling in my mouse to zoom in and out. This makes things very easy. Okay, so what's the first thing that we're going to be doing here? We're going to be based on this section. Okay, we're going to be adding things to present our project, to sell our project much better. So let's imagine this is our final board, and we will have some plans here, or maybe some text, diagrams, whatever, and this would be the central image of our project. This would be basically the first image that the eyes of our viewers are going to be looking at, and we want to make this project stand out. And imagine the idea of the project is these volumes emerging from the terrain, and we want to create this soily, ground-like look, as if it was part of the landscape. And the first thing we need to do is to make this project kind of blend in with the mountain or the hill we have here. So we left in your folders from exercise 1 a file called brushes. Okay, just by double clicking on each of these, EKR tree brushes and grunge brushes, digital revolutions, you just double click on it and they will download automatically. Okay, why do we need these? Okay, so think of your brushes in Photoshop as not only a way of, where are we? So I'm going to create a new layer. Not only a way of coloring things. Well, I'm going to change the color now, like so, but a way of introducing elements in a very refined, in a very subtle manner. Okay, Control Z to go back. Okay, so if you're not happy with something, as it happens in many of the in many other softwares, Control Z and you can go back. Okay, so if you go to your brush tips, okay, you have many folders here. Okay, and all of these folders I have are folders you will be using further along in the course. Okay, and the one I just downloaded was this one, EKR tree brushes, and the idea here is to use these brushes to make my section, to make my elevation look that much better. Okay, so we're going to start, for example, with, I think this one, for instance. No, this one. Fine. And if I just click, I've created a new layer. You can create your new layers here with this button. Okay, I'm going to call it treetops. Treetops. You have to be really organized with your layers. As I said before, we will end up using 50, 60 layers in total. And if you're not organized, and if you know exactly what goes in each of the layers, you're going to take that much longer to do your drawings, to do your collage, and everything's going to turn out to be much messier. I can guarantee you that. So anyway, so treetops, and click on the thing, and as you can see now, my brush is, exactly the brush tip I selected. You can either have like a normal plane, the one that comes by default, or you can press caps lock to see exactly how it's going to look like on your drawing. Okay, so the kinds of things we're going to be doing now, we're going to be playing with the size of the brush tip, the color of the brush tip, okay, and the different brush tips we have just downloaded in the EKR tree brushes thing. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this, and the next thing, which is very important, is what colors we're going to be using. Well, colors are very important, and we get very us architects, we get very proud about the color we select. Okay, in Photoshop you have this wild, it's called the color picker. You've got this wild selection of colors, and it may be very tempting to say, oh, I love this green, maybe a bit grayer and so forth. But if you select more than 5 or 6 colors and you just pick it from here, in the end you're going to get a result that is going to kind of not look coherent in terms of in terms of how the colors contrast with each other, how the colors look. So for this, if you click on color libraries, okay, you have families of colors. So Photoshop is doing the work for you here, and I highly recommend, if you are not an expert, which you probably are not, just choose one of these color families and go with it. So there's millions of colors, and it sort of does the work for you, because you can also note down the colors that you prefer. So for example, this one is 1345C, so I'm gonna stick to this one, and if I ever lose it, I know it's Pantone 1345C, and I know it's this family, the one I've selected. So if I want to give it like an autumn-like ground, as I said, soily look, so I'm going to go for this family, and I'm going to click on this one and caps lock, and then my brush. Okay, caps lock for my brush to see it well, and now I can, I've got a more the look that I was looking for. Great. I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to sorry. This is a selection tool, rectangle selection tool, and I'm just selecting all there is to get rid of it. Okay, fine. So what am I going to do? I'm going to play around with the brushes and the sizes, and right now I'm pressing the Alt button and the right click on my mouse, and I'm moving it sideways to change the size of my brush tip. Okay, so this is very small. I could do it here. Okay, I could change the size here, but it's easier to use the Alt button. By the way, when you click here, you've got a lot of options. Maybe you won't have it as clear as you have it here. You've got a slider here that you can change in order to see the brush tip better, okay? And you can select in your settings button, okay, what you want to see. So you can see how the brush stroke looks. We're not going to use the brush stroke for this exercise, so you can eliminate that. And I've selected the name because I want to, I want to know what I'm selecting in order to look for it afterwards without having to check out, what the brush tip looks like. And remember, this slider to make things bigger, it's gonna make it much easier for you to select a proper brush tip. Fine, so let's carry on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to integrate this, maybe one here. For example, and I'm going to go back to my Pantone and I'm going to find another color and I'm going to look for another one. This one, for instance. I'm going to select a size which is similar to the trees I already have, different color, and there we go. And then, well, I can do the same. So I'm playing around with the colors. Maybe this one's a bit too dark, but I can always play with opacities. I'll show you what opacities are in a second, and I can change 3C, for example, and somewhere like so. Back to my colors, and somewhere over here. Okay, well, I didn't like that. Maybe here, maybe a bit smaller, and over here. Why am I not liking it? Because it's the same color, so I'm gonna just, so there's some contrast and we can see the difference. There we go. That's very similar. I think okay, so important tools in Photoshop, which you're going to be using a lot. Selection tools. First, we have these selection tools. You're going to be using the rectangle a lot. If you are in the layer in which you want to select things, okay, you can just select it, and by clicking on this one you can move things around, okay, or you can erase them. Make sure you are in the layer in which you're selecting, because if I were in this layer in the template section and I do this, I'm not selecting anything, okay? I'm clicking on Control D every time I want to deselect. I want to go back to the state of not selecting anything, okay? And so apart from having this rectangular marquee tool, okay, I have the polygonal lasso. This is probably even more used, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you back to the treetops and back to my brushes, and I'm going to show you the kinds of options that you have, which are common to my rectangular marquee, okay? So I'm going to come here, and what this does is that you can sort of click around whatever it is you want. If you double click, you close your lasso, okay? And if you subtract, so if you erase in your key above the enter, you can go back. Many times the selections are complicated, right? So imagine I want to select this and I've got to do a lot of clicking and I make a mistake. Oh, I didn't want to select that, so you can go back and select exactly what you wanted. Okay, that's important. And something which is also very important is these selection tools. Okay, we're going to leave it by default on this one. This one is add selection. Why do we want this? Imagine that Control D, I want to select this tree for whatever reason, and because I want to edit this, and for some reason I decide that I want to select this one too. So by adding selection, I am going to add selection to whatever my previous selection is. So I could just select this one and add it to my selection and edit both of them at the same time. This subtract selection is exactly the opposite. Imagine I wanted to select these two, and for some reason I decided, no, I just want to edit this one. So I will only have to select the one I don't want to change in order to subtract the selection. I can do this. These two are used very often in architecture and in everything we're going to be doing, in collage especially. Okay, this other one is like a combination of both. So imagine, I'm going to use the marquee one. Imagine that we have this and we select this. If I click on this one, excuse me, I'm gonna click. If I click on this one, okay, I've clicked, I've done a rectangle and I overlap these. What Photoshop is going to do is select what is on both selections, which is this central rectangle. Okay, another important selection tool, the magic wand. This one is also very important. This one selects by color. Instead of pixels clicked on your workspace, it selects by color. So the main tool we're going to be using here is tolerance. So if we put tolerance 1, you're only going to select the colors from this, I'll take this off now, from the exact same colors you're clicking on. Okay, so that's the exact same colors. It's leaving out these colors here. Okay, but Control D, if you put, for example, 10, it's going to select more colors than your original selection. Okay, and if you take it up to, imagine, 100, I don't know if it allows 100. Okay, it allows 100, and you click on this, it's probably going to select every single color in your selection, because there's a lot of tolerance. So you're going to be playing with that in order to select exactly what you want. Okay, what we normally have here and in architecture is something between 15 and 30. Okay, 15 is okay. This button, anti-alias, means that what the selection is going to try to avoid is going to be as smooth as possible. It's going to try to avoid these sort of steps. Okay, these pixels are like can get, by selection of color, can get really nasty, these steps. So it's going to smoothen your selection. Contiguous means the following: If I click this one, it's only going to select the colors that are within, you know, the same area. So if you jump out of this color selection, then it's not going to select. Okay, remember, without this, I just selected these and every color was selected. Whereas if I just click on this one, I have just these selected. So it's very useful for coloring, for example, selecting, you know, very specific things. Okay, and finally you've got the sample or layers. So if you click on this, it will select layers from all the, I'm going to create another layer, excuse me, Control D. I'm going to create another layer so you see it. This one, I'm going to find my brush again and change the color. Okay, so if I go for my magic wand and I have this off and this on, and I click here, wait a second, Control D, I'm going to click on this one, back to my magic wand, not the contiguous one, sample or layers, click on this one, it will go across, you know, all the layers, okay, what I select within all the layers. But Control Z, if I have this one on and these one on too, it's just going to pick the ones within the contiguous zone. I normally have this off so it selects within the layer that I am in, okay. But anyway, that's the idea. I'm going to get rid of this layer, delete layer, yes. Control D to deselect that. Remember, you can also hide your layers. This I here is for hiding. Okay, sometimes it's easier to work. Imagine that you're doing something very specific here and it's going to happen straight away. Just by clicking on this button, you kind of well, depending on what you're going to do, it's going to be easier to work afterwards. Okay, so I am going to get rid of this, Control D, and maybe add a final treetop to my selection. Maybe go back to the first, this one, and also change my color, out, fine. Okay, this is going to be called treetops, and I'm going to create another layer now, and I'm going to call it tree trunks. Tree trunks. And as you will have seen in your menu of tree brushes, you will have seen these ones. Okay, and what we're going to do, we're going to select, for example, this one, 3A. Remember, if you're not in any layer, Photoshop isn't going to allow you to draw anything. You have to select the layer in which you want to draw. Okay, and I'm going to select like a darker color for this one, maybe this one. And just one click will do for this. So it's not the concept of painting and drawing when you have very specific brush tips kind of changes. Let's go for this one, 3B. I'm also going to change the color. I'm using the darker ones because this is more a linear a line drawing than I want it to stand out a bit more. There we go. And maybe this one too. Gonna go back. Somewhere over here. Okay, so that's it for now. Next would be to open your files and come back to these trees. So again, what we're going to do here now is drag them in. And you can see you have a rectangle here for editing and selecting, and you can edit it. I'm going to have this one over here, and you can use the keys on your keyboard to move things around. And when you have this box, okay, in order to be able to carry on doing things, you need to click enter. Okay, sorry, hit the enter button. Okay, and next one, or this one, tree 2, where can I put it? Maybe somewhere over here. This is just adding subtle changes. Just improves so much your the final enter, the final result. And as I am dragging them in, it's putting them into separate layers, which is also very useful if I want to edit. This is a way of integrating my project with the landscape. Okay, enter, and last, tree 4, drag it in. It's not showing yet, and make it smaller. Perfect, here we go. Maybe it's a bit too big. Great, so next step, so it's already looking much better. Okay, so next step, what would it be? I want to put all these layers into one group of layers. Okay, you can either just select them all, if you select them all by pressing shift and the last one, okay, not this template selection, treetops, and then you click on the folder here and it puts it into a group, and I'm going to say here trees. You can also give it a color, green for the trees, and I'm going to put these two layers into a layer called template, for example. And so I can just click on this one, group 2, drag it to the bottom, call it template, and after the group has been created, I can just drag these into my folder. Okay, and normally we give like the red color to an important group of layers. Okay, so there we go. So we're going to carry on, and for this I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to call it terrain. Yeah, terrain. Terrain. And I'm gonna, this is very white. I'm gonna select, the darkest color here, and I'm going to use my bucket tool. Okay, bucket is like a brush, but it just paints everything there is. Okay, and it works the same way as my magic wand did. So it's going to, if you have this, if you don't have this on, it's just going to color every single pixel from that same color. So we don't want to do this now. Okay, we want to keep it within our limits. Okay, tolerance, I'll give it 15, and off we go. There we go. But this solid color, okay, it's much better than what we had before, but it doesn't add, you know, it's just maybe a bit too much. So we want to integrate this this terrain, you know, section bit with these colors, not with these trees. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to use back to our brush, and we're going to use some of the brushes, the ones we haven't used yet, Digital Revolutions. So it says grunge brushes, digital revolutions, and we're going to use one of these to, for example, this one, to make it look better. Okay, we'll see. Oops, Control Z. We're gonna, so mainly we used, you know, the lighter colors for this, and if you click on here, you'll see the result. No, it's just looks, you know, it's sort of integrating this part with this area. Okay, but I'm going to press Control Z because you probably have seen that I've painted part of my, you know, where the trees were. So I don't want to do that. So the way in which you can select the pixels in which you want to paint, if you click on your layer and you click on here, select pixels, it will automatically select an area of pixels correspondent to the layer in which you are. Okay, so now if I click here, I'm not within the selection that I am, but if I click here, I am. And wait a second, I'm going to make this brush a bit smaller, and I want to make this part here darker. So there we go, just by integrating. That works. Great. Control D to deselect. And next would be create another group. I'm going to call it terrain. Have this here and change the color, maybe orange. And now it's time to color out my building, and for this I'm going to hide this trees layer. Okay, and again I'm going to use the same colors, but I do want to make this building stand out, because I mean I want my teacher or the jury of the competition, whatever, to focus on my building, right? So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call it facade 01, and I'm going to color out my color using the bucket, and I'm going to start maybe not with the lighter colors, because I want it to, you know, to stand out a bit more than the trees. Okay, so if I click on these sort of elements here, this is probably not the most important part of the project, but it is important. Great. Maybe this one too. Fine, and I'm just going to check out. So maybe something which could be helpful is, and it's always helpful almost in every case, is to drop the opacity of things just to make things blend with each other. Okay, so for example, check out this tree 1, okay, this one over here, as I drop the opacity, maybe if it's ever so slightly, it's going to, now with the tree too, it's going to blend into the drawing. Tree 3. Tree 3, you probably see this, okay, well, we can change that in a while, I'll do it in a second. And tree 4, probably not as important, but we're going to do it either way, maybe to 90%, something like that, okay. Wait, we're going to put the facade here, okay, to have our tree here. So we've dropped the opacity of these trees, but we're going to do the same with %, okay. We may have to add a couple more touches here, okay. And tree trunks, maybe not so much. Okay. And fine, for these volumes here, as I said before, the idea is to facade 1, I'll create another layer, facade 2, facade 2. The idea is to make it seem as though it emerges from the terrain. So I'm going to pick the darkest color and I'm going to find one of my brushes, maybe one of these. Okay, it's saying this because I haven't selected my facade. And what can I do to select, exactly what I want? I can use the magic wand, Control Z. Okay, where are we? So you have to go back to your template. So what happened there is that I had this layer selected, I clicked with the magic wand here and it just selected everything because there was nothing in the layer. So I have to go back to my template, okay, select this, and now I can start using my brush. Don't forget to select the layer in which you're going to draw, because I've been to this one to select and now I have to go back to this one in order to draw, and I'm using this one, 213, and I think the darkest color. There we go. I'm using always this side. Great. And what I think I'm gonna do is this orangey look. I think I'm gonna create a new layer, facade 3. I'm gonna get the magic wand, click on these. Okay, Control D. I'm going to hide this one, okay, because what I want to do is to have these rooftops, the other parts of this volume with a different color, because the contrast I think is too much. So if I just trees, off they go. Select this better, and now I'm going to erase this, going back to facade 1, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to select this color because I just didn't like the contrast, and yes, use this. Control D, and now come back to this layer and a darker color, maybe this one. Yeah, because I wanted these volumes to stand out. Okay. And the next step would be to have these inside a group called facade. Click on this and change the color, maybe blue, okay, and drop the opacity of this significantly, and drop the opacity of this one also by a lot. And maybe this one, as I've been saying, just a tad. I'm not liking this corner here, so I'm going to go back to my brush, back to the facade, and I'm going to take it up again because the color would be different. And what's happened? Template section, and to my brush, there we go, that's it, and drop selection. Okay, finally. So if I just have a look, maybe I'm gonna find my trees here. I'm gonna go to tree trunks. Maybe there's a tree trunk missing. So I'll go back to my brushes, find a tree trunk I'm happy with. Maybe a dark color, because I'm seeing that maybe something's missing there. Fine, and okay, that's it for now. And maybe this volume here would be great if it had this same color. So if I look, it's opacity 66, I have to take it up again, get the color I used before, I think it was this one, use the bucket tool, okay, only because I want it to be seen. Okay, I know I haven't colored this out, but I want this, you know, to be seen because it is sort of forgotten. And then back to 66 or 70, just so it's a nice and round number. There we go. And maybe this one, chop it a bit more. Great. And finally, what I think is important, maybe this white. Imagine this is our final board, okay, and we want, you know, we're putting diagrams here. Maybe we want to create a sky, no, a sky, a gradient. For this, we are going to use the gradient tool. Create a new layer. We're going to call it sky. Maybe sky should be blue, and this facade should be, I don't know, yellow. And in your bucket tool, if you right click on it, you've got the gradient tool, okay? And the gradient basically means that you can click somewhere and drag wherever you want, and it creates a gradient. And there's many kinds of gradients. So what I'm going to do, you can have an orange or one of your colors and a white, one of your colors and a black, okay? I'm going to click on the background. I'm going to go to my library, okay? I'm going to find my Pantones, my color family, and I'm going to look for one that is a bit more, a bit darker, okay? I'm going to create a gradient with the lighter color and the darker color, okay? And it's going to be, you know, like the sky, maybe starting here dark, and as you go up a bit lighter, okay? You've got here the ranges, okay, of, where are we, sorry, basics, of what you can have, okay? So you can have from black to white, you can have from your selected color to transparent, and you can have the both colors you have selected, the background and the foreground, okay? So I'm going to select this one, and then you've got these options. This is a lineal, like a line gradient, the one we're going to use by default. This is like a round, gradient. This does it by angle, so it's going to start with a darker one on one side, and as you go around it creates this gradient. And this is also like a line, but it starts from one point, okay, and it sort of expands to the sides, okay, and this is like another shape, okay, a diamond shape, okay. We don't normally use these, we normally use this one, okay. And if we use shift, what we're going to do is we're going to do, you know, a nice uniform line, okay. So just bear in mind, the shorter the line is, shift, the more contrast you're going to have, okay. So we want to start from here, from the very bottom, okay, and we want to have a nice, you know, long gradient. And why is it covering the whole drawing? Because it's on the top, okay. We're going to take it to the bottom, not here, here, and okay, it looks nice, but it's just sort of makes the project disappear, which is something we don't want. So we're going to drop the opacity by quite a bit. And we also said that we wanted the darker bits here, okay, the darker part of the sky here. So I am going to go back, and I'm going to do it the other way around. Or just maybe Control Z. Okay, the other way around. This way around. Great. Again here, and opacity. Nice and brilliant. Maybe a bit more. So if you do something correct, but you think that maybe you overdone the color, or looks too uniform. Create another layer exactly where it was, and I want to maybe create a bit more contrast this time. It's too much. Okay, and now what we can do is, yes, we set more or less 50%, and we can compare. So this one's much more uniform. Prefer this last one. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this layer, delete layer, yes. And so once you've finished something, so maybe this would be whiter, maybe I could maybe a bit more here. So maybe now you should have to file, save as, and make sure you save it on the Photoshop PSD, okay? And you say, well, exercise 1, okay? Always in the PSD, to make sure you don't, you know, miss out. You can always come back and change. If you save it on other files, you can lose information. Save. And off we go. Great, so for the next exercise of this video, we are going to go through adjustment layers. So I'm going to need you to find your folder, downloaded files, and find this one. It's called Competition Board. It's a competition we entered in Plaza de Castilla. If you dragged it into this layer, you would have it in your previous workspace. If you have it here, you'll have it in a separate window, okay? Okay, and what we're going to learn, as you can see here, we've got background, we've got one unique layer, and we're going to apply changes to the layer without actually changing, editing what's on the layer, okay? So adjustment layers is this icon here. Okay, the circle. If you click on it, all of these are adjustment layers, and we're just going to go through some of the most important ones that really make a difference. The great thing about these adjustment layers is that you can see how it looks. You can see, imagine, and you're not actually changing the layer itself, okay? So, well, this is what we did before. We applied a solid white to our previous layer in order to give it a white background. I'm going to delete this one, okay, and we're going to start with brightness and contrast. Brightness and contrast, we normally tend to use more contrast, but brightness, well, basically what it does, makes our image that more whiter or darker, okay? It's also adding a lot of contrast here. It's quite complicated to use because it's kind of, you know, all the changes are quite exaggerated, right? Whereas contrast, on the other hand, is probably a bit more subtle, and we tend to use it more, especially adding contrast when, in this case, you've got a lot of greens and brownish green tones, and it's going to help, you know, make those, you know, these trees stand out a bit more, right? Also in you've got line drawings here. If you want to make them stand out more, you can move this around. In this case, I want to, you know, I want to focus, I want to give importance to all this area, the park, So I'm adding a bit of contrast, and as I said, you can always turn it back on and off to see what you've changed, and you can even double click on this and go back to rechange it. Okay, I'm going to leave this like that for now, and we're going to go to check out more contrasts, more adjustment layers. Levels is also an adjustment layer we use quite a lot, and you've got these three sliders. This is going to get our blacks, darkest colors, and they're going to make it even darker as you slide it along to the right. Okay, and this one's going to get our whites, and it's going to make them even whiter as we slide it onto the left. Okay, this one's probably the most useful one, and it gets our grays, and it's going to make them lighter or darker. Okay, creating that contrast we had before, but focusing on our grayscale basically. So if you focus, for example, these black and whites, these areas that are more grayish, and you see how the image improves. I mean, you get more definition there. The quality of the final result is clearly improves, right? And well, you can sort of change, hide, and see how the image improves little by little. Other adjustment layers is vibrance. Vibrance is one of our favorites here. So what it's going to do, well, you've got saturation here, and this will basically get your colors and little by little take them to your grayscale. So it's saturating, adding that grays to our colors, okay, or desaturating or saturating, sort of adding that intensity to your drawing if you wanted. This will be very exaggerated. We don't normally use this one as much, especially when we use it, we sort of drop it to make the images that are not as important in our project a bit more grayish, especially when there's color. We do use, and we use it more when we have colors that are more intense, such as yellows, oranges, and if you drop the vibrance, the colors that are not as intense will sort of drop into your grayscale, and the rest will maintain their slightly their intensity. So if you've got a very colorful image and you want to keep the color, but you don't want to have things stand out as much, then this is a good adjustment layer for you. Okay, there we go. And anyway, again, we can check out the difference. So we have the contrast, the levels give, and the contrast. This one, it's very subtle changes, but the image is changing more. It's turning more into the what I want. Basically losing a bit of color, focusing on the center. It's a very powerful image, this one, and we want to make the best of it by bringing the eyes, bringing the look of the people or the viewer into the essence of the project, right? Another adjustment layer, hue saturation. Hue saturation, on the one hand we have saturation, which is the same we've seen before, okay, adding saturation or desaturating. Lightness basically turns our pixels one by one, adds black to them or white. Depending on what it is you're doing, it may come in handy or not, but we don't normally use this one. Hue, on the other hand, helps, it sort of colors your pixels within a range of colors. So for example, if I wanted to turn, because it starts off as being like a pretty green range of colors, but if I wanted to change this, maybe have it a look, a more autumn-like look, I could, you know, okay, this one for example over here, and you see the difference. It also is helpful if you are handing in more than one board and you want to create sort of, you know, have all the colors within the same family. It's helpful, especially in this case when there's just one layer. Bear in mind that what these adjustment layers do is that they're affecting the layer that is, well, the layers that are under this layer. In this case we only have one, so if we had a layer on top of these ones, that layer wouldn't be affected. So you can play around with the adjustment layers to change the ones that you want to change. Okay, and we want to check a final one, which is our photo filter. Photo filter, well, this one by default is orange, okay, and you can add orange to it. Okay, so if I'm looking to add that autumn-like look I was talking about, orange would probably be the best option, but you can sort of decide on, you know, the photo filter you want to apply. This one's too gray, but I mean, for example here, purple, and you could add that purple to it. In this case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add an orangey yellow grayish tone to it. Maybe this is a bit too much. Okay, and the great thing about these adjustment layers is, again, that your layer is not affected directly, so you can always get shots of them to check out what it is you had, and you can change, you know, hide and see, you know, exactly, you know, and in order to see how your adjustment layers have affected the final image of your project. For example, I have all of them on now, and probably I'm seeing that I may have lost a bit too much color. So I go into this vibrance tool and could not, okay, there we go. Well, that's it for now. You can use more than one, or you can use just one, and remember, you can apply it to one layer only, or all the layers that are under this one. Now, and for the final exercise using Photoshop for this video, we are going to combine what we've just learned about adjustment layers and learn a couple more techniques to start growing on our skills, to start improving. So you've got to open this one. It's called render. Okay, this is going to be our first sort of realistic view of a building. Okay, you can see that, well, this has been sort of exported from SketchUp, and you can clearly see the volumes here. It's a sort of round building. This is like a hallway or a corridor that is round, but the image is quite dull, quite plain. We want to add a bit of intensity. We want to add sort of a purpose to it. We want to help the viewer understand what the building is about, right? So the first thing we're going to do is, as we did in the first exercise, add white background. Make sure this is 255, 255 and 255, and put it here. Rename your layers always. I'm going to call this render template, and I'm going to call this one white background. And before you start, when you start, probably the best way to start off well is to duplicate your layer and use a tool which is the blending options. Okay, so I just pressed Ctrl J to get my main render and multiply the layer. So now I have two layers over each other that are exactly the same. I could say render template 02, and if you click on this one and you start using the adjustment layers, I'm using now the arrows in my keyboard, and what this is doing is that it's combining the pixels and just adding effects to it. Some of them are horrible, some of them look really nice, okay, and just many of them actually add contrast or add value to it. You understand better the building. I've just seen this one. Overlay is an adjustment layer we're going to be using a lot. It adds contrast, it gives the image that much more power. So I'm going to leave it like that, and so the image is improved just by duplicating the layer and applying your blending options. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my folder and I'm going to drag this one, it's called the wired, and enter here, and we're going to learn in this video a very important tool, which is the masks. Okay, masks are here. Okay, this Japan like icon, click on it, and what we're going to do now, we're going to be drawing on top of our current layer in order to see through the layers that are under it, okay, like a mask. So if I'm going to show you nice and clearly, if you get a black and you get your brush and you go for the most basic of your brushes, this one, the soft round, okay, I'm going to have it now in 100%, but you would never pick this one in 100%, okay, because it's all about making gradual changes. So if I clicked here, you can see directly across. Okay, I don't want to use this opacity 100%. I want to make it 30. Okay, and I want to make this brush more or less 1/5 of the whole width of the drawing, more or less like so. And what I'm going to do is every time I click, I'm going to see through the layer that is under. And why is this useful? Because I can combine both layers in my own as I wish. Okay, so I'm basically clicking on the parts where I want where I want the viewer to focus on. So I'm kind of creating like this magical world where lines and volumes and solid colors intersect. Okay, so every time I click, I am sort of breaking into this white mask 30%. If I click another time, it will be 60. If I click again, it will be 90%, and the fourth time will be just going across it. Okay, so now you could understand here how the structure works, but you can also see the space, you can see the roundness. Great. Okay, so finally we've got this one here, X-ray. Put it on top, and we're going to apply more blending options to it. See if there's anything. Multiply, we also use multiply a lot, and these ones, well, this one has a lot of power, but maybe it's too much, it's not adding value to the softer light. This one's also cool, but maybe too comic like. Soft light seems to do the trick. So look, again, as I was doing in the other exercise, you can hide it to see what you had before. So I can see the lines, I can see the, how the space works, what the space is about, and now, it sort of adds that extra power to it. And what I would do now is select the layers, click on this folder, and create a group called render template. So this will be the starting point of an image like the one we have. This will be just like 15% of the work there is to do. Okay, after you do this, there's millions of options to carry on to, to add purpose to the image. So for example, what we did before, okay, I like the image, but I can maybe give it a bit of contrast, see how it looks, or maybe vibrance. As I said before, we like vibrance. If you click on the slider and drag left to right, so you can see what the most exaggerated version of the effect is, you can more or less have an idea of what it is you want to do. Okay, and finally I'm going to give it levels. Levels adds that extra contrast to it. Maybe not this one as much, sorry. Maybe a bit of contrast here, maybe not as much. And keep it here. Okay, so firstly you can duplicate your layers and use blending options. Then you can duplicate your layers or use other layers that give complementary information and create masks to combine the layers. And finally, when you've got like an image that's created and you like, you can improve the image by using your adjustment layers. Then, well, there's millions of things to do. You've got filters, and you could add elements to your collage, but this would be like a good way of starting. So I could go back to my mask and back to a black. Maybe give it extra strength here if I wanted. Anyway, there we go. Again, save as, and always in your PSD. Say exercise 02. Save. And for the last exercise of this video, we would love to introduce you to Illustrator. Okay, so Illustrator has very specific purposes, very specific functions, and you have to learn this program. When it comes to polishing and finalizing your plans, your layouts, your other collage, you may be tempted to using AutoCAD or Photoshop because you can do many of the things in these two programs, but you're going to save up a lot of time if you get out of your comfort zone and start to learn these new programs. Okay, Illustrator is used for three main purposes. Okay, the first one being as I just said, designing your layouts. So if you have 3 boards to hand in, whether it's in uni or even in an architectural competition, and you want to decide where everything goes, well, you've got 2 programs for that. One is InDesign, but it's probably more used for when you have more artboards here. If you have fewer than 3, or from 1 to 5, I would use Illustrator. It's very useful for making sure that your layouts turn out, the final result is great. It also has the function of designing diagrams and quick sketches, whether it's communication diagrams or bioclimatic diagrams, things to help understand what the project is about, quick sketches that are going to look very good and are very, very quick to finish. Maybe in AutoCAD and Photoshop would take a bit longer. And finally, you can also do vector-based collages, as like a kind of a copying, cutting, pasting, in order to put across ideas in a very quick manner. We'll see that further along in other videos. Okay, so for now we will study how to compose a proper layout, but for now just click here on A4, create, and we are going to see basic tools in in Illustrator. You've got to bear in mind that this is Adobe, and Adobe is a similar work process in every single software. So on the one hand, we're going to have our toolbar here, drawing options, painting options, editing options here, and on the other hand we have these 3 windows here. Okay, kind of like what we had in Photoshop. Make sure you've got this color and appearance here, stroke, transparency and gradient, and finally layers. Okay, so first thing you have to know, you also have to make sure you've got this toolbar connected. You can find here window and control, this one. This is the one you gotta make sure you have. Okay, and well, we're going to see some very basic layers. First one, rectangle. Okay, so what's the main difference between Photoshop and Illustrator? Photoshop is a bitmap, so you've got millions of pixels, like small squares that have different colors, and that composes the image. In this case we have vectors, so it's kind of like a mix between AutoCAD and Photoshop. Okay, so you can play around with the vectors, so you don't lose resolution by making things bigger or smaller. Okay, and every time you create a vector within a layer, okay, I could say this one is rectangles. Okay, you are creating sub layers. Okay, so it's not exactly groups and layers, it's that you've got a layer dedicated to whatever you like, and then sub layers within that layer. Okay, I can select them and erase them. Okay, this is a selection tool, this one. You can press V for a quick shortcut to getting there. Okay, so that is one thing. Bear in mind these changes with the layers. So I could create another layer as I did before, and I could say layer 2. I'm going to do strokes. Okay, and now how do I do strokes? I'm going to use this one, the pen tool. Okay, the pen tool, it can work kind of like the lasso, and you can't see what's going on at the moment, but when you use the pen, you're actually doing 2 things. You are drawing a stroke and you are filling whatever it is you're drawing with a color. Before I had a white color. Okay, and now I have a red one. Okay, so you can, it works as a lasso, but it also works if you click on Shift, you have straight lines. Okay, straight lines. And bear in mind that right now I am filling this with a white background. Now it's red because I double-clicking on this square, it takes you to your color picker in order to change your background. So check out these two icons here. On the one hand you have this square, and on the other hand you've got this sort of square donut figure here. Okay, I say donut because it has this hole. This represents the stroke, and I can edit the stroke by double-clicking on it and clicking on the color I want. Okay, so now I've got a yellow stroke and a blue fill. Okay, but I can also get rid of the stroke if for whatever reason I don't want to use it, or I can get rid of, sorry, you deactivate it here and you go back to it here on color. Okay, I can also get rid of my fill. Okay, there we go. So that's quite important. Other things you can do, I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to call it arrows, and this is probably the best tool and the most common tool used in Photoshop, in Illustrator. So if I use the pen again, say I press Shift and Shift here, okay, there's a number of things I can do. So bear in mind I've deactivated the fill, so there's no fill here, and I'm going to give it a black. Okay, so we see it a bit better. Now I can edit. Why do we use this a lot? Because it's going to help us with our diagrams. Imagine you've got a crossed section, you want to stick arrows out of it in order to tell what's going on, or you have maybe the plan of a neighborhood, a city, and you want to draw, you want to express, again, you want to go to different points in the plan and say what's happening there, and you can use these arrows. So you've got a number of options here. Okay, you have here like some arrows, which if you click on them, you get to see more properties or edit properties that you have. The first one is the weight. Okay, the weight is how heavy the line is. Okay, so I can make it narrower or thicker. Okay, then you have how your stroke ends. Okay, how it finishes. So check out here, we have like a square end I selected, and I can make it round, or I can make it square but finishing after the vector ends. Okay, comes in very handy for these for these diagrams. Also, you have your corners. You can change your corners, make them round, make them like this, go back to them, and you can, which is also very important, make your line, your stroke, dashed. Okay, and here in these options you can decide how long you want your dash to be. So say 1, and how long you want your gap to be, 1. That is too short, so maybe 3 and 3. You want to have a larger, so you can edit your dashed line, and you can even compare it with the size of the paper, which is very quick and very efficient, a very quick way of working. Apart from these stroke options, you can also change the the edges of your line to create arrows. Okay, so you can use this these, okay, and you can change them. We use here at the studio number 7, nice geometric, pure, you know, equilateral triangle. And you can also change the other part using these other arrowheads, okay, so you can edit that too, okay. Using this black arrow, the selection tool, there's many things you can do. You can select, you can move, you can rotate. Give me a second, sorry, here we go. Rotate. Pressing shift, you can rotate in 90-degree angles, 45-degree angles, sorry. There we go. And you can scale. Using shift, you will keep the same proportion, okay? Using this white arrow, direct selection, you can sort of dive into whatever geometry you've created. Double click on this one and I can maybe readjust more specific parts of my shape, okay? It's not as common as this selection tool, but it offers other options, such as, for example, maybe you can make this round again. Maybe you can change this one. It's called direct because you sort of, once you've created something, you can edit it, you know, maybe by parts, okay? So anyway, that is what there is to know about your, you know, strokes and fills. Remember, you can always go back, select an individual vector and change, you know, change its fill, okay? So you can probably imagine by now, this is coming very handy for certain diagrams. You can change also the opacity here. So I've selected this and now it's, you know, less opacity, and now I can move it. You can do this again and also change the opacity, play around with that too. Comes in really handy for these, you know, bioclimatic or even, you know, communication diagrams, explaining Project Forever and so forth. So last tool of the day, last gradient, last very useful tool that Illustrator has. Gradient is here, okay, and you can, by the way, I'm zooming in and out as I was in Photoshop, and I am clicking on the space bar to move around as I was in Photoshop. So this icon here is called the gradient tool. If I select this one, remember, let's imagine we have a yellow here, okay. I click on the gradient tool and it gives me this gradient. By default, it's always going to create a white to black gradient on a, you know, on a vertical, horizontal axis, okay. You can change your, you know, edit your gradient here, but you can come along here, here on gradient, and you have your slider here and you can change things here. So for example, if I double click on this white round, you know, slider, I can change here on the right. Be careful with this because it's not very intuitive, and you can change, you know, whatever color mode you prefer. In this case, I'm going to go for CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow and black, okay. And now I can say I'm going to go for a green here, great, and I'm going to double click here and again maybe red, okay. So after you do that, okay, you can move things around which is, you know, the same option here, or you can even create more points of, you know, if you want to change a gradient, so I can create more. You know, and this changes, and you can move these things along. And if you finish, press enter or go back. If you finish, you can select and, you know, go back to your editing. Okay, so that's the most important tools for this, for starting the first part of what we're going to be learning about Illustrator. So now I would like you to open a new file, A4, and pop into your folder with your exercise 4 documents. Come into this image, and as we did in Photoshop, just drag your image in, and we're going to use these same techniques to do things to this image. Okay, I'm scaling this and I'm pressing Shift to adjust it to this A4. There we go. It's a building, and we're just going to start adding, you know, information to it. So the information we're going to be adding is going to be slightly different to what we were doing in Photoshop, because, you know, the purpose of Illustrator is always going to be a bit different. So for this image, let's imagine that these volumes here are our project. Okay, these volumes here, and you can't particularly see them very well right now. So you imagine we've done our project, everything is fine, but we want to, you know, we want to take out these 3D drawings to start to explain certain aspects of the project. So the first thing we want to do is to make these volumes stand out a bit and explain what they are. So the first thing I'm going to do before I start, I'm going to name this layer. I'm going to call it AXO template. And something which is quite important in Illustrator is locking your layers. Once something is locked, you cannot change it. And this is important, more important than in Photoshop, because accidentally you can start moving things around by, you know, clicking things without noticing. Okay, so after you've done whatever you need to do in a certain layer, lock your layer, okay, create your new one, and then start working on the new one. Okay, this first one I'm going to call strokes. So what I can do for these volumes is I can select my pen tool here, I can erase the fill, and I can look for maybe a nicer color, maybe a bit redder, something like that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to this works in exactly the same way as the lasso. So if you make a mistake, you can go back, in this case Control Z, so your final result, probably in Photoshop, you want to try to integrate things, make things more realistic. In this case, it's just like helping you explain whatever it is your intention is in the project, or if there's, you know, functions or this is not well drawn, but more or less somewhere over here. But they can also end up looking great especially if you have like this, if you go through the same process of work every time you do one of these. Okay, great. So now everything is, let's get rid of that. Okay, so now you could edit if you wanted this stroke. I want to make it you know, maybe a bit less heavy, or I want to make it more heavy, and so forth. Okay, so that could be something you could do, okay, to explain. Let's imagine these volumes here are also part of our project. Okay, so I'm going to lock this layer and I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call it gradient, because I'm going to apply a gradient here. And in this case, well, because the gradient, I'm going to use the same tool as I was before. The pen, where's my pen? Excellent. Remember that after you finish with a stroke, you can edit it, you can edit the fill, you can apply a gradient to it, and that's what I'm doing. I could do it, you know, directly, but it wouldn't make much sense because I want to see what I'm doing. In fact, probably if I just said right now 0.1, it's going to be easier for me to work because you know, the line doesn't occupy as much, right? And then I can move things around. But what I am going to do, I'm not going to just here to have a fill. Sorry, I'm not going to have a stroke. So no outline. I'm just going to apply a gradient. Great, so I close this, and well, again, I could come over here and change this. I can get rid of it. I can give it some color. Okay, sorry. Okay, give some color, or I can, as I was saying, apply a gradient to it. So I click on here. And as I said before, by default, you're going to have from white to black and on this axis. Okay, so I can change the angle of the gradient here, which I am going to do. Instead of 0, I'm going to give it a 90 degrees angle. Okay, and let's imagine, for the sake of argument, that I want to express that, you know, maybe there's heat coming from below and the building, maybe these upper volumes are cooler. Okay, so it starts losing temperature as you go up the stories. Okay, so I would have to select, double click on this one, the white one, and I would have to look for maybe a blue here. And after I'm done, oops, I can drag this. So if you double click here and give it a red, okay, so here, well, the idea would be that there's more heat here and we're losing temperature as we go along. So the problem here is that we've created a gradient that's covering the lines of our building and we don't want to lose that. So to arrange this, click here on transparency, and you can apply one of the blending options that Illustrator offers. Multiply. What it does is going to grab what is behind, in this case it's black lines, and it's going to take it up front so you can see it. Okay, there we go. And now we lock and we're ready for something else to add. Let's check out this part here. So let's imagine there are things here I want to demolish some parts of this rooftop. So I want, just to create an arrow with an icon here that says, hey, we need to demolish something from here. So I'm going to create a new layer, double click on it and just say arrow. Okay, and I'm going to use the pen, shift and shift. Okay, make sure you don't have a fill, so no fill here, and well, 0.25 is okay, but I want like a neater looking arrow, of course. And so for example, here I'm gonna have one of these round, not there in the other one, because on this one I'm gonna have my icon. Okay, so I want to change, I like dashed lines, it's not as intrusive in the drawing itself. So there we go, something like that is okay. May have it a bit heavier, so I have to select this, and yes, that's better. And a rectangle, if I click on shift, look, now by default in the same layer I'm going to get exactly the same stroke and dashed line. Okay, that's fine. And what I want to represent is that I'm going to demolish this. So if you go to your file here in exercise 4 in symbols, you've got this symbol, drag it in as we have so many times. So if you wanted to do this with any other program, you would take so much longer. Okay, great. So I can also select this now and say, okay, I want some maybe round. Okay, excellent. Things like that. Oh, maybe I just don't want this to be dashed. Get rid of that. Just to, so this and this is more or less the same language. And well, that will be it. And you could add many things to your sections, diagrams, and so forth, in order to improve, the presentation and what you put across to whoever is viewing this your project. Okay, so don't forget to save as on Illustrator exercise 4, and we'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.